Satnam everybody and welcome back to the Human Truth Channel. My name's Adi and today I'm delighted to be introducing to you Dr. Michael Breus. He is a double board certified clinical psychologist and a sleep specialist who is widely known as the sleep doctor. He's one of the very few psychologists who have become board certified in sleep medicine, which is a field traditionally dominated by physicians. He's also the author of The Power of When, which is a New York Times bestseller book that brought the idea of chronotypes into the mainstream and helped millions of people understand not just what to do, but when to do it based on their biology. Over the years, Dr. Breus has become a trusted advisor to elite performers, executives, athletes, and creatives, all people who are operating at the highest echelons and who share one common challenge. Their minds do not know when to shut off. His work has been featured across major platforms, including Oprah, CNN, and The Dr. Oz Show, where he's helped bring serious sleep science into everyday conversations.
Most children actually make 4 times the amount of melatonin that their brain needs. When I was growing up, we didn't think about health for ourselves. Not kidding. Like if you look, you'd be shocked at sleep affects every organ system and every disease state. So step number 1 is to have 1 wake-up time. Step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3 has to do with alcohol.
Today's guest is super special because I met him at a YPO event earlier this year and I was blown away by the way he spoke about sleep and so many misconceptions we have regarding sleep. What I personally respect most about Dr. Breus is that he does not treat sleep like a checklist or a wellness trend. Rather, he treats it as a biology, something that shapes our health, our relationships, even our decision making over decades, often without us realizing how much of a price we're paying. So in a generation which glorifies hustle culture, burnout, and surviving on just 4 hours of sleep, and I'm looking at all my college students out there, I wanted this conversation to feel like one of the many that we don't realize we need until our late 20s, 30s, and beyond. Dr. Breus, thank you so much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks for having me, Adi. I'm excited. That was one of the best introductions anybody's ever done. Bro, that was amazing. Thank you. I love it. Fantastic. Fire away. Let's go.
So Dr. Breus, let's jump straight in. What originally pulled you into sleep as your life's work?
So it's kind of a long story, but hey, we got time, right? So it was completely by accident. I was not planning on being a sleep doctor. In fact, I went to the University of Georgia, where I was there studying sports psychology, believe it or not, performance psychology, sports psychology. I wanted to work with athletes and make them run faster and throw harder and all these cool different things. And the residency that I was interested in going to, so when you get a PhD, you then spend a year afterwards basically practicing all the stuff that you learned while getting your PhD. And so while I'm sitting there getting my PhD, I wanted to apply to this very particular program in sports psychology. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get in. Only the Harvards and the Princetons and the Yales of the world got into that particular program. I went to Georgia. It was a top 20 program, but it wasn't Harvard. But they had a very specific side track open for sleep lab. And they said we would be willing to fund a student in the sleep lab. And so I was like, aha, this is how I will get in. I worked my way through graduate school in the electrophysiology department. So I'm the wonky guy who liked to take apart machines and put them back together. And it turns out they use the exact same machines in the sleep lab as they did in the lab that I worked in. So I said, I'm just going to sell myself as a sleep guy. And then once I get there, I'll transfer, right? How tough could it be? So, go through the whole thing. I get in the program. I show up day one, raise my hand. Yes, Dr. Breus. I said, well, I wanted to find out about transferring. They said, we had a feeling that you were going to ask that, Dr. Breus. So here's the deal. You have to stay in sleep for the first 6 months that you're here because that's where your funding is coming from. But for the second 6 months, we'll let you go to any part of the program. You can do the sports part, you can do eating disorder, whatever you want. I was like, this is fantastic. I'm like, how tough could it be? It's sleep, right? I do it every night. Like, what could be so difficult about this? Let me tell you something, Adi. By the 3rd day, I absolutely fell in love with clinical sleep medicine. And I knew I was never going to change. And I'll tell you why. I help people this fast. It's unbelievable. You change someone's sleep, you change their life. Like, it is fundamental to who they are as a human. And it's such an impactful thing to be able to do to somebody. It's very unique to not like, it's hard to get that kind of an effect on a human in many other ways other than like cutting them open and, doing that kind of stuff. But from a psychology standpoint, it was super duper rewarding. I felt like I was doing a lot of good and I just became super passionate about it. So I never looked back after that.
Wow, that's quite a story, huh? Was there ever a moment where you realized that sleep was being misunderstood?
Oh my gosh, almost in the very beginning. As soon it was kind of funny because when I finally became a doctor and was out in the field and kind of doing my thing, and I would say, I'm a sleep doctor, people would be like, "Are you an anesthesiologist?" I was like, "No, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, insomnia, sleepwalking, sleep talking, all that kind of fun stuff." And I think that most people don't know a lot about sleep, right? It's kind of this mysterious thing, but yet every single person does it, but has almost no idea how it works. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? I mean, I think we all have a few ideas like, hey, it's probably not a good idea to have a pot of coffee, 10 minutes before bed, right? Like those are things that are pretty obvious, but it became obvious to me that a lot of people have a lot of questions about sleep that they never get a chance to ask them to anyone because like if you wanted to come see a sleep doctor, you'd basically already been diagnosed and be in my office, right? Whereas many people, when I'm at a cocktail party, are like, "Oh, I've got a question," right? And that's when I started to realize that I think people really need to get more educated about sleep and sleep medicine. And look, I'm enough of a ham. I don't mind standing up and talking to people and having a good time and answering a few questions.
Wow. And funnily enough, that's how we met
Yep.
at a fancy cocktail party where everyone's number one question was, how do I improve my sleep without giving up my glass of wine?
Yes, that was there. That was, as a matter of fact, their very big question.
And that's actually a question I got from a lot of the audience and friends and
Oh,
family I polled because, I'm a college student at USC where
yep.
you also teach a class.
Yeah,
And
sleep and performance. Sign up.
so, let's talk a little bit more about what's happening in the body and the brain.
Sure.
How would you explain at a biological level what sleep is doing for the body and the brain?
So sleep, I think the word recovery really helps kind of establish what sleep does, and it does it in many different ways, right? And so there's a physiological recovery, and then there's a psychological, mental, emotional recovery that goes on there, right? And so the way I like to think about it is when you're looking at sleep, it's actually easier to look at it by the sleep stages because different sleep stages will do different things. So we know that deep sleep, as an example, stages 3 and 4 sleep, or what we call delta sleep, that's the wake up and feel great sleep, right? That's the physical restoration. That's where growth hormone is emitted. That's where actual cellular repair occurs. Whereas REM sleep, that's the mental restoration, right? That's where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. That's where you process emotions. That's where you're able to gain data and then be able to retrieve it for answering questions and things like that. And so when you start to think about it, it starts to make a lot of sense that, hey, maybe I should start looking at how do I get as much deep sleep and REM sleep, and of course the other stages as necessary, in order to complete the cycle so that my body has time to recuperate.
So, correct me if I understood you correctly. You're saying that there's two main parts, which is the REM sleep for the psychological, the brain part of things, and then there's the
Deep sleep.
stage 3, stage 4, deep sleep, where the body recovers and heals itself.
That's exactly right. Now, to be fair, during stages 1 and 2, there's several things that go on there as well, but we don't need to get into all the details of that. But I would say the two big ones, if people are looking around or want to learn more, those are the stages of sleep that make the most sense in terms of what do they do for me and how do they work.
So, how would you put this in one sentence? From the minute our head goes on our pillow to the minute we wake up, what are the stages that someone goes through?
Sure. So it's very interesting. It's actually quite a pattern that most people follow. So you basically go from wake to stage 1 to stage 2, down to stages 3 and 4, then back to stage 2, and then into REM sleep. So you don't just go all the way down the stairs and land in REM, right? That's just not how it works. You have to actually go down the stairs and then come back up the stairs, and then you end up in REM. That's considered to be a sleep cycle, right? And so an average sleep cycle is somewhere between 80 and 120 minutes. So on average, about 90 minutes long or so. And so what we have a tendency to find is that people sleep in cycles, right? So how many cycles of sleep will you have across the night? So to answer your question, your head hits the pillow and then your head wakes up. What's going on in between? Sleep cycles are going on. Normally people have between 4 and 5 sleep cycles, and that makes up an entire night. What's also kind of interesting is while the sleep cycles have a tendency to follow the same pattern, the amounts of each type of sleep are different in each cycle. So as an example, in the first third of the night, That's where we see all the physical restoration. That's where we see a preponderance of stage 3, stage 4 sleep. Very little REM sleep, very little, sometimes only a minute, right? Then when you move to the back half of the night, that's where we see all the REM sleep, but once again, almost no deep sleep. So for whatever reason, it seems to have been separated into the entire evening where you have physical restoration that becomes first, then you have a period of time that's kind of a block off, and then you've got mental restoration that seems to occur. But I want to be clear, both of them are occurring all night long, but the bulk seems to occur part in the beginning and part in the end.
Wow. So it's physical first and then mental.
It is. And I think I know why. I pondered this question before. I think I know why. I think it has to do with evolution. I think because when you fell asleep back in caveman days, right? And let's say you only got to sleep for 3 or 4 hours before a Tyrannosaurus Rex tries to eat you, right? Then basically your body needs to recover fast to get up and get the heck out of there, right? And so I think that from an evolutionary standpoint, that's really where some of this came from. Now, there's a lot of kids ask the question, wasn't there what's called a second sleep? So this happened a long time ago where there were actually 2 sleeps. And so when we were an agrarian society where all we did was farm, people would go to bed when the sun went down. They'd sleep for about 6 hours. Then they'd wake up in the middle of the night. They'd have a meal. They may have sex. They may have conversations with people, right? Because those homes, they live in big homes, blah, blah, blah. Then they would go back to sleep and then wake up at dawn and then do the farm thing again. So you would have 2 sleeps. Once this idiot Thomas Edison invented this thing called the light bulb, he screwed everything up for everyone, because as soon as you could turn the lights on, you didn't have to have 2 sleeps anymore. You just worked on into the night, and we combined those together. So a lot of people wonder, if I wake up in the middle of the night, is that my body's kind of thinking that I need to go into my second sleep? Right? In actuality, what's going on there is it's a temperature change that's going on. So it turns out that sleep follows your core body temperature cycle. So as you're about ready to fall asleep, your core body temperature starts to rise, and it hits a peak. Once it hits that peak, it drops. That drop is actually a signal to your brain to release melatonin, right? And so melatonin is kind of the key that starts the engine for sleep. It's not the only thing that you need, but if you don't have melatonin, you're definitely not sleeping. Then your core body temperature continues to drop. And then at some point in time, it's got to head back north. Otherwise, you go hypothermic and you die, right? Not good. And so what ends up happening then is your body heats up, and then it heats up. And when it heats up to a point where it wakes you up, it's morning, right? And that's how sleep works.
Wow. Wow. That's an incredible explanation. Thank you. I did not know that at all. Thank you for that. So you said a few things, and that I want to touch on really quick. One was about the light bulb, and second was about melatonin.
Yeah.
So as a Gen Z college student, melatonin is all the rave, right?
I'm sure.
You pop a melatonin, but most melatonin is about 10 to 12 mg per serving.
Yep.
I remember you once said that the actual dosage for melatonin was much lower. Could you talk a little about that?
Yeah. So let's talk about melatonin. So number one, melatonin is not the best idea. Melatonin is good. It has a good use case in 4 different instances, and that's it. And by the way, Gen Z is not one of them. So use case number 1 is for jet lag. So first of all, let's back up for a second and see describe what melatonin is. Melatonin is a circadian pacemaker. What that means is melatonin doesn't make you feel sleepy. Melatonin tells your body it's time for bed. Okay. Now people might say, that seems like the same thing, Dr. Breus. Help me differentiate the 2. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you were out playing frisbee in the quad, or lacrosse, or football, or track, or you did something really physical, and you are just dog tired, and you get in bed 2 hours earlier than you normally do. Let's say you get in bed at 8 p.m., right? Your body is physically tired. What happens? You're staring at the ceiling. Right? You're not going to sleep at 8 o'clock because it's not your bedtime yet. What melatonin does is melatonin can institute a bedtime. So most people are using it incorrectly. That's number 1. Okay. The right use cases for melatonin are jet lag, shift work, right? Shift work would make sense. People who work at night, their bodies aren't used to sleeping during the daytime. So we have to give them melatonin to tell them that their bedtime should be during the daytime. So that's case number 2. Case number 3 are people who are melatonin deficient, right? That would make intuitive sense. Now, to be clear, almost nobody is melatonin deficient until you hit the age of about 50. Then we start to see melatonin production begin to decline. So for some of my older patients in the 55, 60, 65 age range, I'm 57, we see melatonin production slow down. That would be an important time to consider using it. The only other case that I've ever seen, there are two disorders that it can be useful in. One is ADHD, the other is REM behavior disorder, but that's about it. So most people are using it incorrectly. That's number one. Number two, most people are using the wrong dose. Most people are overdosing. So the appropriate dose based on the data out of MIT is between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams, right? You almost can't find it in that particular dosage. Like I went to the drugstore the other day just to kind of scan the shelves and look. I couldn't find it in anything under 3 milligram gummy. I could not find it. It was unbelievable to me. So I have to tell patients, look, whatever you find, crack it in half if you're going to actually use it because you're overdosing on melatonin. Now, people oftentimes say, well, Michael, what happens if I overdose on melatonin? Like, will my brain stop making melatonin if I'm taking melatonin like testosterone would because it is a hormone? The answer is no, definitively. That study has been done. You can take melatonin, you can stop taking it, and your body will reproduce it again. So you're not going to be doing yourself any great big harm. However, there is one area that almost nobody talks about, which is critical. Melatonin interacts with birth control. Did everybody hear that? Melatonin interacts with birth control. It makes it less effective, okay?
Wow.
That's thing number one to understand. Melatonin affects antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. Okay? There are a lot of students who are using antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. Want to be super clear here. There's no pill shaming here. Nobody cares. It's all good. If you and your doctor have come to the conclusion that that is a medication that is appropriate for you, please continue. Okay? But if you take melatonin with it, it's going to mess it up pretty bad. It also affects two other drug classes, which are diabetes medications and blood pressure medications. This is such an unbelievably unknown, it's unbelievable to me, but many people walk over to the GNC or the CVS or what have you, grab a bottle of melatonin, pop one back, try to go to sleep, and they have no idea that it's messing up all kinds of other things in their system.
Wow.
Two other quick things that are important to understand about melatonin. Number one, melatonin should never be used in children. Period. Full stop.
How young?
Under the age of 18.
Wow. I was popping melatonin at 15, 16. I definitely should not have done that then.
So here's the difference between men and women. So men reproduce their sperm every 24 hours. Women are born with all their eggs. So if a guy did it, I don't have nearly as many problems with it. However, it was not appropriate. But you probably didn't know. And most people don't know. Again, this is not well popularized because what ended up happening is people sell supplements and they make a lot of money from them and they don't really care how it hurts people. I do. So it drives me freaking crazy. Most children actually make 4 times the amount of melatonin that their brain needs. So if you're giving kids melatonin, here's what you're doing. You're teaching your children that they need a pill to sleep.
Wow.
And that's a problem.
You know, if my mom heard that, she would literally be like, I told you so.
Well, I think I might have to be in agreement with your mom. Now, I will tell you, man, there's one group of kids where melatonin does work and we do prescribe it, and that's kids on the autism spectrum. We don't know why, but fairly decent sized dosages, like 5, 6, 7 milligrams, can be actually quite effective in that specific group of people. So
touching base on that real quick, I've recently come to learn so much more about ADHD and the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
I understand that if, the average human were to take an ADHD or an autism spectrum test, they would fall somewhere within the spectrum because, it's about neurodivergence.
Right. So neurodivergence is it's an old term that's kind of come back again, if you will. I'm not always sure what everybody's using as a definition of neurodivergence, but the most recent categorization, at least that I saw, put ADHD into that category, but at the very, 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 very mild end.
Wow. Interesting. Well, let's backtrack a little and shift gears.
Sure.
You spoke a lot about how you've been helping so many people who are at the top of their careers, at the top of their fields. How did you become the doctor people at the top trust?
Such a great question. First of all, Adi, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of relationships. And I'll tell you probably the three biggest factors in how to, if you really want to work with the best of the best, if you want to work with the biggest CEOs or the biggest athletes or the biggest celebrities, number one, you must understand what confidentiality means. You must, because nobody wants to work with you if you're going to be a blabbermouth and tell everybody that you're working with them. That's number one. 99% of celebrities that I work with have no interest in me talking about them. Now, if they want to talk about me on their own, no problem. I could care less. That's fine. It actually helps with my business. But generally speaking, you want to be thoughtful kind of about confidentiality for sure. The second big thing that I think we have to think about a lot with people, that a lot of people haven't really thought about, is trust. Right? And where do you get trust? Trust builds over time. That's really the only way it seems to occur. So what ends up happening is when you, it's kind of like a domino. When you treat one celebrity and you do it well, they tell everyone. It's like they have their own little network, like their own WhatsApp group or something like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, I was working with Dr. Breus. And all of a sudden it's like call after call after call after call. And so I've been very fortunate. Also, I would say that exposure helps. So I've been fortunate. You mentioned one of my books. I've been fortunate enough to write 5 different books. And so when you're in the field as an expert, right, and you're a clinician, by the way, those are two very different things. People who write books, generally speaking, are experts, but don't necessarily see patients. People who see patients generally see patients, right? So you want to really learn from or listen to people who have experience with patients. And so from that standpoint, put all of that together, and that's usually how you end up with a lot of celebrity clients. And I'll be honest with you, there seems to be 2 to 3 types of celebrity and powerful clients that I have. People whose egos are massive, and I cannot deal with them, and so I kick them to the curb. And then some of the nicest, most grateful, most genuine people you've ever met. I've been very fortunate. I've had only a few small run-ins with some not so great patients. And if I'm honest with you, it's probably because they were so tired, right? You know, and that's one of the things that I always have to keep in mind as a sleep doctor is almost everybody that shows up at my doorstep is cranky because they haven't slept well. So, you know, you keep those things in mind and you want to be thoughtful and things like that. But celebrities, generally speaking, and powerful people, generally speaking, they've got the same issues that we all do. And when you treat them with respect, but you treat them at eye level, you don't worship them. You don't think, oh my God, I can't believe who you are, because I don't really care who they are. Half the time I actually don't even know that they're celebrities. Like my assistant's like, do you know who you were talking to? I'm like, I have no idea, Becky. So, you know, just being thoughtful and understanding that they're human and they have their needs.
Wow. And what would you say surprised you most when you were working with these elite high performers?
Well, there's interesting. When I work, they're kind of different. So like, as an example, when I work with athletes, it's all about precision, right? It's all about what time do I need to go to bed? What time do I need to wake up? You know, how many ounces of water, you know, what kind of stretching, you know, what kind of supplementation? Like, it's very technical for them, and they like very precise recommendations. I think that's one of the things that I'm not surprised by, but I had to dial it up a notch, because when you're working with elite athletes, they're worth the best trainers in the world. So, you know, you walking in and not knowing your stuff is not an option, right? They want to have a history lesson on why you're telling them to do all this stuff, and then they want a very precise, you know, protocol from which to work. Non-athletes, high performance professionals, it's about access to excellence. They're just not interested. They got plenty of people in the world to kiss their ass. What they're not interested in, what they want is they want somebody to fix their problem. Period. Full stop. That's all that they're interested in. And if you can do that, you're going to be in great shape.
Wow. Interesting. So it sounds like success does not protect people from sleep problems.
Oh my gosh. In some cases, I think success makes sleep problems worse. You know, I meet some people, you know, Adi, where they've become so successful that now they're paranoid. Like I have one patient who's a billionaire, and he doesn't know who to trust, right? He thinks every single person in his life wants something from him, and he might be right, you know? And so that causes a level of stress, and that keeps him up at night. You know, can I trust my spouse? Can I trust my kids? Can I you know, like all of these things start going, crazy thoughts start going through their head. So it's interesting.
Wow, that's so interesting because, a few years ago I came up with this analogy that, if we were to break the word disease into two, what do we get? Dis
Die.
and ease.
Dis-ease, not ease.
Exactly. And I realized that so many diseases that people suffer from begin at the root cause from dis-ease, from some form of symptom. And it
I would
seems like,
agree.
it's not protecting anybody from it.
Yeah,
Wow.
no. I mean, sleep is an equal opportunity, manipulator. If you ain't gonna get good sleep, let me put it to you this way:
Hmm.
I've been surprised, but only rarely at the people who have sleep problems. I mean, I've worked with kings, I've worked with princes, I've worked with presidents, I've worked with celebrity actors, I've worked with athletes, I've worked with politicians, I've worked with some of the highest business people in the world. I don't think anybody is immune to sleep problems.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about, how success kind of correlates to the audience we're talking to, which is primarily Gen Z and the younger audiences.
Mhm.
We live in this hustle culture, right?
Right.
Where we celebrate that, oh, I slept less and I burnt the midnight oil and I got X, Y, and Z done. How does, that function? Because, some people say that, hey, I can function great on 4 or 5 hours, but are they working on borrowed time?
Yes, they are. So here's part of the problem is the brain can avoid sleep deprivation for only so long. It's kind of like you're going, and then you just slam into a wall,
Hmm.
right? And as soon as you hit that wall, all bets are off. So what happens is the body overcompensates, 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 and then finally it's just like whammo, I'm done, time to shut down. And that's when all the problems happen. Physical problems like reaction time slowing down, emotional problems like irregularity and not being able to keep your emotions straight, and then mental problems like not being able to calculate things, not being able to perceive opportunity, things of that nature.
Wow. So the effects are profound. Then what's biologically different when it comes to Gen Z compared to, let's say, some of your older patients? You must get to see both ends of the world.
Yeah, different types of anxiety is probably the biggest difference. I don't
Hmm.
think there's any real fundamental differences. Like, I think once you hit adulthood, if you're 22 years old versus you're 52 years old, the problems are not that different, but the intensity of them might be a little bit different. Level of responsibility that you might have, things of that nature. But I would say that from a prevalence standpoint, I don't know if Gen Z is worse. For example, if we were looking at sleep apnea, then I
Hmm.
would say no, Gen Z is probably not worse. Older is going to be worse because older has a tendency to be a little bit heavier, things of that nature. But with insomnia, then might be the opposite, right? We might see more younger people having insomnia rather than older people having insomnia.
Hmm.
So it depends upon the disorder, I think.
Hmm. So focusing on the Gen Z part, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to go on a quick anecdote.
Sure.
When I was a teen, I hated going to bed early.
Oh yeah, they all do.
And I wanted
I
to
can tell
stay
you
up.
why.
Tell me.
So your circadian rhythm was pushing you to stay up late and sleep late. So what we know that between the ages of 13 and like 20,
Hmm.
everybody has a circadian shift where basically everybody wants to stay up late and then sleep late the next day. And so for you, if you were in that age range, there's no way you want to go to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock.
But why? Like, why does the circadian rhythm shift completely?
I don't think we know. If I'm honest with you, it's a well-known phenomena, but I'm not sure anybody really knows the origin of it. But I'll check into it. I'll get back to you on that.
Interesting. So I have this working hypothesis that, we have this dopamine feedback loop. Then we have every app nowadays, which has this, what I call this,
Yes.
black hole of doom scrolling. Every app from LinkedIn to
Everyone.
Instagram to Snapchat, they have it. I feel my hypothesis, this is causing something to shift in our brain where we're looking for this constant dopamine hits and it's really affecting our sleep. So, to all the parents out there, how should parents think about sleep for their teenagers because they're going through this shift,
Yeah.
hormones are changing, plus the phones are there.
So it's hard. I would say that one of the first things that I've done when I work with teens, especially kids who are still in high school or things like that, is I think education goes a long way. And I think sitting down, like, here's what's different, I would say, about Gen Z versus when I was growing up, is when I was growing up, we didn't think about health for ourselves. I mean, we like to do sports, right? And we knew if you were an athlete, you needed to stay healthy, but you didn't really necessarily know what that meant. I think your generation is much more interested in what that means, and they've started to identify how sleep has become such an important component in that whole kind of mass of what's going on with them. Does that make sense?
I'm going to be honest. I think could we try to condense that in one
Sure.
sentence? Yeah.
So ask me the question one more time.
So the question was about how parents should think about sleep for their teenagers.
So parents should educate their teenagers about what sleep is and what sleep isn't, and how sleep is related to their personal performance, whether it's sports, academics, social, what have you, to get them to understand the importance of sleep. Then give them the guideline and the rules that are established for them to do that. Things like set a regular bedtime, get yourself off your phone, have 30 minutes before you go to bed, like some quiet time, maybe reading, things of that nature. But once you can explain to a teenager, hey, number one, this is how your body functions normally. Number two, if you want to do all the things that you like to do, like be social or play sports or do academics or play on your computer, all of that is affected by your sleep. And so what I try to do is I try to hook a motivation to what it is. So if a kid likes video games, I go look up research. Did you know there's research on sleep in video games? Because there is. Yeah, if you sleep well, guess what? Your score gets higher. So I take that research and I hand it to the parents, they hand it to the kids, and they're like, I'm going to bed. So like a lot of times it just has to do with motivating and figuring out where the motivational aspect is. I'll give you a good story that I think you'll like. So I was treating this, a couple came in, they had a son who was 15, and they couldn't get him up. School refusal, he'd roll out of bed at 11, he was failing his classes, all these problems, right? So I bring him in, and he's kind of a punk, kind of a tough kid, whatever. And I was like, do you have a girlfriend? He looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, yeah, I do have a girlfriend. I said, does she drive a car? He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, she does drive a car, because he was 15, his girlfriend was 16, right? And I said, does she go to school on time every day? He's like, oh, she's such a star student. She goes every day. She's there early. She's in study hall. She's doing all these things. I said, I think we got this problem solved. I said, from now on, your girlfriend's going to show up outside your door 30 minutes before school starts, and and she's going to drive you to school every day. And guess what happened? The next day, he woke up perfectly fine. And the next day, and the next day, right? It's about motivation, okay?
Wow. That's awesome. I think I'm going to make sure that every parent who watches this takes this away from them, that they need to speak to the interest of their child, find something that motivates their child. Wow.
Yeah, so I found a study on Guitar Hero and sleep. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, if you look, you'd be shocked at sleep affects every organ system in every disease state. Everything you do better with a good night's sleep. So if you've got a child who plays an instrument, I can show you a ton of data that shows that you'll play that instrument better if you're well slept. If you've got a child who's an athlete, I can show you a ton of data that says that they're going to perform better there. An actor, same thing. Memory, all that stuff. Academics, computer, you name the hobby or the interest, and I can show you how sleep makes it better, right? And that's what you do, is you just tag them together.
Wow. So I care a lot about my sleep, right? And I recently have been really auditing my life. I've been putting everything on spreadsheets, tracking my energy throughout the day, my output, what time I go to bed, etc., etc. But here's the thing, Doc.
Okay.
I'm 24 years old.
Yeah.
I also live life, and I'm still in college, and sometimes all it takes is one late night with your friends, which
Trust me, I know.
throws a rhythm off. Why does that happen, and how do you actually hit reset in that moment?
So here's what's interesting about that is if you are hyper consistent before the event, before the I'm hanging out late with the guys event, right?
Mm-hmm.
What ends up happening, your body snaps back much, much faster and you really don't have as many problems. But if you have an irregular sleep schedule going into an event and then you're out with the boys and you're up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching basketball and having a good time, right? Then you're doomed, right? And so what I tell people all the time is sometimes you log your sleep kind of like you're training miles. Right? You just keep logging them and logging them and logging them. Because then if you're going in the, let's say it's race day and it starts to rain, you ain't worried about it because you know how to log those miles and you just push on through. And that's kind of how it works for people, right? Is again, you have a situation of consistency, then you have a situation of inconsistency, and that allows you to hop back into that consistent situation.
So how do we build it? Let me give you an example.
Sure.
I took your chronotype quiz, and quick shout out. I think it is chronoquiz.com.
Yes, chronoquiz.com. You got it.
And I was first given the chronotype of a wolf because I've always been
I'm a wolf.
Owl. And recently, it changed to bear.
Oh, I wish I was a bear. Bear would be the best.
But I want to be a lion.
Yeah, everybody has lion envy, right? So let's explain to everybody what the quiz tells you and all that kind of good stuff. So Chrono Quiz is a quiz that I invented that can tell you something called your chronotype. So a chronotype is, are you an early bird, a night owl, someone in the middle, or someone with a very disrupted cycle? I named them animal names to make it easier. So early birds are lions, right? People in the middle are bears. People at night are wolves. And then people with irregular sleep schedules are dolphins, okay? Now, most people, after they take the quiz, they say, oh, Dr. Breus, I wish I was a lion, because they want to be the early riser. They want to be the person that's super productive, going to bed early, all this kind of stuff. Let me tell you something. Life isn't so easy for a lion, okay? I know a lot of lions out there, and here's what happens. Dinner and a movie is out for a lion. Like, they're not party people. They're in bed by like 8:30, 9 o'clock, because they're waking up at 4:30 in the freaking morning, like on the regular, because that's what they like to do. So, number one, you cannot force this schedule onto yourself. This is genetic. So look, I'm 5'9" and I'm never going to dunk a basketball. I've accepted that, right? Accept your chronotypical genetics and you will be so much better off. The middle group are bears. They make up 50% of the entire population. So it's best to be a bear because there's so many of them out there. And if I'm honest, society's schedule really works best on bears. Like a 9 to 5 schedule is perfect for a bear. Bears like to get up around 7:30 in the morning. They like to go to bed around 10:30 at night, right? It works for them. Next are wolves. That's what I have been historically. I'm a night owl. I've always been one my entire life. Ever since I was a teenager, I never kind of came out of it. They like to stay up late and they like to sleep late. For them, waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning is a chore. That's tough. They'd rather wake up at 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and start their day then. The fourth category, which is what the one that I discovered, are called dolphins. And so dolphins have an irregular sleep pattern. This is very similar to like ADD and ADHD, right? So in this generation, people who've got severe ADD, ADHD, that can really mess with your sleep because of your medications, because of overstimulating, all these different things. Those people might fall into the dolphin category. And then once you know what your category is, I've given protocols for each one to help you sleep better.
Interesting. So I have a couple of quick questions straight off. So the whole thing about being a wolf, being a night owl, that perfectly describes me. I would never want to get up before 10 or 11 in the morning.
There you go.
Recently, I've been pushing myself to make my bedtime earlier. Why? Because once daylight savings hits, the sun sets at 4:30 p.m. and I feel like I'm losing out on daytime. And I love the sun. So I've been trying to get up 6, 7 in the morning as much as I can.
Probably miserable.
And what sucks is because I've been so hard on myself, when I finally start clocking in 7:30 a.m. mornings, I wanted to push it to 5:30. And then
don't do it, bro. Don't do it. Look, respect your chronotype, okay? There's some people who were born that way. There's some people who just weren't, right? And so here's what I tell people is you're kind of going against your genetics, like you're going against Mother Nature, if you will. And what I try to describe to people is if you can figure out what your chronotype is and you move the activities that you want to do to the times in which your chronotype will do them best, you will do them best. So as an example, if you're a lion, you're an early morning person, you wake up at, let's say, 5:30 in the morning, well, then you know what? Reading detailed information at 6:30 in the morning is probably just fine for you, right? Because you're up, your mind is ready to rock and roll. But if you're a night owl and you try to read detailed information at 6:30 in the morning, are you kidding me? Like, even if you try to force that onto yourself, it's not going to work. Like, it's just an effort in futility. So what I tell people all the time is if you can figure out your chronotype and follow that, this is the ultimate hack, by the way. This is the ultimate hack. I can teach people the best time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask their boss for a raise, sleep, nap, write a book. Like, my book has got all of that in the book based on your chronotype. I call it the ultimate social hack.
Wow. So does your chronotype ever change? Does it evolve?
It does. Great question. So everybody goes through every chronotype. So think about it. When you were an itty bitty baby, you were a lion, right? Went to bed early, you woke up early. Then toddler, like middle school range, you were a bear. Went to bed at 7:30, woke up at 7:30. High school hits, you're a wolf, right? Now you're into the late. Then at about 25 or so, your chronotype has a tendency to set for about 30 years, okay? And then at about age 55, 60, my age range, it starts to go backwards. Now, so think about it. If your mom or your grandma is still alive and you went over to her and you said, hey, grandma, let's go out for dinner. What time would she want to go out to dinner? 4:30 in the afternoon, right? Something like that. Because their chronotypes are becoming more lion-ish, right? And that's just a natural progression. Kind of like how adolescents go late, elderly go early.
Wow.
Pretty crazy, right?
I learned something so new today.
I'm blowing your mind, bro.
So, quick question on chronotypes before we change to the next topic. If, let's say, we have, someone below the age of 25, someone who has experienced, being a wolf, a lion, a bear, all of it.
Yep.
Is there a way for us to kind of mold ourselves before we hit 25 so we pick the right chronotype for the next 30 years of our life?
So you don't get to pick your chronotype, it picks you. So it's genetics. Believe it or not, if you had a 23andMe or an Ancestry.com, I could show you exactly where on the human genome this is. Like, this is not theoretical. This is based on something called a single polynucleotide SNP or a polymorphism called a SNP, right? And so when you look at DNA building blocks, if they're normal, then your sleep is normal. You're a bear. If they're flipped one way, then you're a lion. If they're flipped another way, you're a wolf. And if they're flipped a completely different way, you're a dolphin. Believe it or not, this is more biology than theory.
Wow. So we just got to lean into our biology. Right? Come again?
Say again?
So we just got to lean into our biology.
That's exactly the way I would want people to think about it.
Wow. All right, Doc. Moving on. You work with so many clients who are across the board in terms of their age demographic, right?
Right.
But when you see some of your clients who are in their 40s, their 50s, and they're dealing with certain problems, do you ever feel like if they had done this one or two things right when they were 20 years old, for example, they could have avoided so much?
Absolutely. You know what? I've got like a 5-step plan that I think would be perfect for people. That if you instituted this plan now, I would say that you would have very little to worry about moving forward. Okay?
That's yours.
All right, so step number 1 is to wake up at the same time 7 days a week. This is not for teenagers. Teenagers get to sleep in on the weekends because they need the extra sleep, and I totally understand it. But if you can, wake up at, if your classes are, like, let's say you have to get up at 7:30 during the week, get up at 7:30 on the weekend. Now, you might be saying, oh, that sucks. I want to sleep in on the weekend. I want to go out on Friday night or Saturday night. I don't have a problem with you going out. Your lower level limit is 6 hours. Okay, so if you get in at midnight and normally you wake up at 6, you're fine. If normally you wake up at 8, get in at 2. I don't care. But you never want to get less than 6 hours of sleep, but you want to try to wake up at the same time because that circadian consistency actually makes melatonin production in the evening consistent as well. So I want to be very clear about what I said. When you wake up in the time that you wake up in the morning directly affects when melatonin is produced at night. Wow. So if you are consistently waking up, then you are consistently getting melatonin at night, which means, number one, you don't have to take it as a pill. Number two, it works in your body exactly the way it's supposed to. So step number one is to have one wake-up time. Step number two has to do with caffeine. I know people love caffeine. They like energy drinks. They like all the Monster, Red Bull, Amp, whatever, coffee, who cares? I don't have problems with them, but you have to be thoughtful when you take them, because the closer you take them to bed towards bedtime and the more that you take, the worse it is for sleep. So as an example, if you wake up in the morning and you drink a cup of coffee, I don't think I care. But if you drink a cup of coffee before you go to bed, you ain't going to sleep. Now, somebody in your audience is going to say, sleep doctor, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I can take an espresso after dinner, or a cappuccino, or a cup of coffee, Monster, and I can go right to sleep. Here's what I'm going to tell you is you may be asleep, but the quality of the sleep that you're getting is awful. Okay? So step number two is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Okay?
2 p.m. Wow.
2 p.m.
I think all the college students are going to go crazy when they hear that.
Well, because if you stop by 2, caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. So 8 hours later is 10 o'clock, which is roughly around when people are going to start to think to go to bed. So that's why I chose 2 o'clock. So step number one, stick with one wake-up time. Step number two, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number three has to do with alcohol. Now, while there are some people who are listening to this who may not be of drinking age, and there are other people who may be of drinking age, I just want to give the caveat that I'm not here promoting underage drinking. But what I am telling you is I'm not such a stupid person to think that people who are underage don't drink. Okay? So if you do any of these activities, let's talk about when you should do them so that they don't have a large effect on your sleep. So if you stop alcohol 3 hours before bed, right, that allows enough alcohol to get metabolized through the system so that it does not have a tremendous effect on your sleep. In fact, what I have my students and patients do is I have them have a glass of whatever and then a glass of water and then a glass of whatever and then a glass of water. By the time they've hit that second glass of water, they're full. And so they're not drinking a whole lot more alcohol. Then they stop, and then 3 hours later, they go to bed. Yeah, they've urinated a few times, but guess what? All the alcohol is flushed out. They've had a nice time doing whatever it is they were doing, and now it's not going to affect their sleep.
Wow.
Okay. Step number 4, the single best thing to do to improve the quality of your sleep is daily exercise. Bar none, you can't get around it. That's what it is. Now, I want to be clear. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to be a track star, football, guy. Fight on, by the way. But you do have to do 20 minutes of cardio every day. That's kind of the lower level limit, and it doesn't have to be tough. It can be walking to the mailbox, walk your dog, walk around the mall. I don't care, but just do something for 20 minutes to move your body every day. But don't do it within 4 hours of bedtime, because you will increase your core body temperature. And remember, your core body temperature needs to drop in order for you to fall asleep. So step number 4 is to exercise daily, but to stop exercise at 4 hours before bed. Last one has to do with when you wake up in the morning. So you're waking up at a consistent time in the morning. If you can, within 15 minutes, walk outside and get some sunlight. I know we're in California, so it's easy to say because the weather here is always so awesome. But sunlight turns out to be incredibly important for moving brain fog out of your head. And so in the morning time, if you can get 15 minutes of sunshine, it clears the melatonin out of your head also. 15 minutes is roughly the amount of time that the human body needs in direct sunlight to produce vitamin D. Vitamin D is a circadian pacemaker, and most people are deficient in vitamin D. So let me repeat the whole thing just so people get it straight. Step number 1 is to wake up at the same time every single day. Step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3 is to stop alcohol 3 hours before bed. Step number 4 is to exercise daily, but to stop exercise 4 hours before bed. And step number 5 is to give the sun a high five every morning and get 15 minutes of sunshine.
Wow, that was incredible, Doc. Thank you. That was incredible. I think that's going to make a super viral clip for sure.
That's what we want.
So, Doc, I know we're coming to the end of our time. Let me do a few quick rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Some of these have come from audience members, friends, family who we've polled. So one question we got was, what are some things they can do to create outsized change for young high performers?
I don't understand the question. Say it one more time.
So I think the question was about how can they take some small changes in their sleep habits. I know you included a lot of in your top five,
Yep.
but what are some other things young high performers can do? Because today, for a college student, for example, one
I
thing you
got one.
sacrifice is sleep.
Yeah, I got one. So let's talk about napping for a half a second. Okay. So a lot of people don't know much about napping. And I want to be very, very clear. If you have insomnia, if it is difficult for you to fall asleep, napping is a terrible, terrible idea. You lower sleep drive, you'll never fall asleep that night. However, for a lot of my high performers, they have so much going on all the time. Just taking a break for 15 or 20 minutes. You don't even have to sleep, but to close your eyes and just to get a little silence around you is a game changer. What it does is it kind of allows your brain to spool up all the information that it's been kind of digging in for a while, and it gives you a little bit of space to just breathe for a few seconds. I personally like to keep my eyes closed. I usually don't fall asleep, but I don't mind if people take a quick nap. Now I'm going to give you a super duper hack. That's one of my favorite all-time hacks. But people out there listening should not do this every day. I call it the Napa Latte. So here's what you do is you take a cup of drip black coffee, put 3 ice cubes in it merely to cool it down, slug it, then take your 20-minute nap. Here's what happens is there's a substance in your brain that accumulates called adenosine. And as adenosine accumulates, you get sleepier. But when you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and you look at the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by 1 molecule. So when you drink the caffeine and you close your eyes and you sleep, you burn through the adenosine. The caffeine fits into that receptor site, blocks it, and you're good for 4 hours guaranteed.
Wow. So that's like,
awesome.
putting nitrous in your body.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. My next question for you, right? Let's talk a little bit about sleeping apparatus. Let's talk a little bit about pillows and
Sure.
bed sheets. Particularly, I've been using this thing called a grounding bed sheet. Are you familiar with that?
I am, absolutely. So let's talk about grounding pads for half a second. So in my career, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've had 3 patients who are EMF sensitive, okay? And I'm always open to the idea. I don't think that medicine and science has yet developed a test that we can test a human to say, hey, you're EMF sensitive or you're not EMF sensitive. So I think people have to kind of start to figure it out on their own. But if you are EMF sensitive, grounding pads can be very, very helpful. And let me back up for half a second and describe what EMFs are. So a lot of people don't know it, but there are wires in all the walls that are around us and Wi-Fi that is going everywhere and all of that stuff. And all of those signals are electromagnetic forces that can be having effects on our cells in our body. And when you're sleeping, you're in one particular spot for 6, 7, 8 hours, you're getting a lot of that exposure going on potentially, right? Now, again, if you're sensitive to it, this is a nightmare. The patient I had, it was crazy. What he ended up doing, he told me, I think I'm EMF sensitive. So I was like, all right, I'm coming over to your house tonight. And we went over to his house, and at bedtime, I threw the breaker box. So I turned off all the power to the entire house, right?
Right.
Came back the next day, we flipped it back on. We did it for like 2 or 3 days. He slept like a baby, okay? So we figured out he was EMF sensitive. All right, now what do I do about it? Grounding sheets. So grounding sheets are one of the things that you can do, and there's a lot of different kinds. Some of them will have a small thing that plugs into the outlet. Some of them will have something that you bury into the ground. Believe it or not, there's now paint, and you can paint your walls in your bedroom, and you can create a Faraday cage in your bedroom. If you if you want to get into it, brother, you can get into it. But they've got some specialty items like that that are pretty cool.
Wow, I didn't know about that. I might have that in my future house. I've been using these grounding sheets, and
You
I
love
love
them?
it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. People who use them love them. Absolutely.
Wow. So let's do this. If sleep were a prescription drug, what do you think it would be prescribed for?
Oh, wow. I've never been asked. That is the best question that I have never been asked. Okay. If sleep was a drug, what would it be prescribed for? God, that's such a good question. There are a couple of things that come to mind. Anxiety, depression, but also happiness, joy. Sleep is so fundamental to so many things. I think sleep is a prescription for life, right? I mean, I don't know. I guess that's kind of the conclusion that I would come to is if sleep were a drug and it was being prescribed, what would it be prescribed for? I would say for life. I mean, look, if you want to live a long life and you want to live a healthy life, there's no universe you can do it without sleep. None.
Wow. So seems like one of my biggest takeaways from this episode is I need to make sure I go to bed on time and I
Yes.
need to prioritize my sleep from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to be clear about one last thing before we go. People out there, don't go crazy. Okay? Don't overdo it. Right? So many people they'll go buy an Aura ring and a Whoop strap and a Polar this and a Garmin that, right? And then they'll start metricing everything. You're gonna drive yourself nuts. Okay? So here's what you want to do. Take a couple of recommendations from today, maybe a couple of the steps from my 5-step program. Give it a shot for 2-3 weeks. See what happens, right? That is you putting sleep as a priority in your life, is attempting something new to improve your overall life and health. That's all you need to do. Don't go crazy. Don't worry about it. And if you're having sleep problems, we've mostly been talking about enhancing sleep and sleep and performance. But there's a large group of people out there that don't sleep well or snore or are concerned about their loved ones, family members, things like that. If that is a concern, consider seeing a sleep doctor. There are thousands of sleep doctors out there. I am by far not the only one. I just happen to be the only one teaching at USC. But there are sleep doctors out there, and there are ways to get in touch with them and look them up online and be able to get in touch with somebody that you need.
Wonderful. And if somebody wants to work particularly with the sleep doctor, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. There's a couple of different ways you can get in touch with me. I would say social is probably the best way. Instagram, Facebook, those are the best ways to probably get in touch with me. My handle is The Sleep Doctor.
Beautiful, Doc. Doc, that was a power-packed episode of so much content. I am blown away. Thank you so much for your time, and you're an incredible speaker. That's what I told you when I first met you.
Thanks,
And
man.
I'm so happy we got a chance to do this.
I'm happy we did too. This is great. I hope I get a chance to come back, maybe have a little bit more time next time, and then we can start talking more about sleep.
Absolutely. Doc, thank you. Thank you so much.
Sweet dreams.
Okay, now let's